All right, good evening. My name is Kelly. I am going to turn this over to Taylor in just a moment, and she's going to go through some of our specific feedback. But I just wanted to let you know, first of all, you guys' manual was great. It had so much detail and so much supported commentary throughout it. It was just amazing to read. When I first read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how our manual, we didn't have that much supported feedback. It was just amazing to see how many quotes and how many references you guys had. I just thought it was really great that you did that. Now, along those terms, one thing, so we all submitted feedback. What we basically did is we all did a general review of the entire document and all the PowerPoints and everything. And then we went back and specifically divided it up, and we each looked at our own individual section that we had worked on so that we could provide more specific feedback. But one thing that came through from everybody was that we could tell that there was quality research. It was great information. It was very detailed, very informative, and very well written. It was very professional. The one thing we did notice was, and this is probably something that you heard from the professor, and I know because we weren't all done when we submitted this, was all the links didn't work, like when you were linking back to the document. And again, I know that's something that you guys are probably aware of, but we did want to, because we noticed it, we wanted to point that out. So all the links, just make sure that they're all active and that they're in the correct place where they need to be in the document. And then just follow the APA format with the double spacing and everything throughout the manual. And then the references in your document that we reviewed were sort of behind each section, and there wasn't a separate reference page. So just to make sure, like the same thing with ours, or just a formatting comments. But other than that, it was great. We loved reading it. I really I couldn't believe how many references, and I know I keep saying that, but when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I feel like such a failure when I did mine, but I really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to Taylor and let her go through our specific bullet points for each section. And I really appreciate the feedback that you guys gave us. So I hope that we can give you guys some helpful insights and make it even better. All right, Taylor, it's all yours.
Okay, first off, did you have an opportunity to look through our feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we did our feedback a little bit different from how you guys did y'all's. We split it more so into each section. And as Kelly mentioned, for every section that we had done on our own project, we went through and we looked at that same section on y'all's, so that, we had a little bit more understanding of what was supposed to go in that section. So I'm going to start with section 1. I want to say that section 1, it looked really great. It had really objective qualifications for the trainer, for the assistant. There was some great detail about the trainees that y'all would be using this manual for. And that was something that we didn't include for our manual. So that was something that I did appreciate to see. I will say, though, in the first section, there were a few instances where there was mention of different mastery criteria and stuff that the trainees would need. And one just general question is like, how are you going to measure that? So like the last qualification for the trainer, mastery criteria mentioned that they should be able to master differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. And like, how are you going to measure if that's mastered or not, So maybe a little more information into that realm would be beneficial for you guys. Same thing for, where was it? Sorry, I got all kinds of feedback right here. Same thing with like the trainees that you mentioned, that they should be 90% mastery of explaining a DRA and stuff like that. You know, like how are you going to measure that it's 90% mastery? Is there going to be some kind of quiz or something? You know, just something along those lines. I really appreciated that y'all included the 80% of IOA because it is so important in the field of ABA that we are, you know, pretty matching on our data collection and that we're accurate with that. So that was something that was super important. I will say there was, hold on, I got a question from Megan. Question on the feedback about the mastery criteria. What do we have the mastery criteria in the DRA competency assessment? Should we link it in that section or write about the mastery criteria explicitly in that section?
Yes, I think what Megan's trying to say is, so your feedback about how are we going to measure the 90% mastery. So we've created a competency that includes that in there, but now I'm thinking, given your feedback, that we should actually put that into the section in the report and link it that we are going to address this in the competency. I think
yeah, and it doesn't have to be like super detailed or anything, just, you know, kind of mention that there's some kind of competency assessment later that will be mentioned later on, more in detail, you know, something like that, that just kind of explains what's going to go on with that. Something that we did for our project and that I've seen through other training manuals and stuff was just like a little more information about the client population, like a rough estimate of the racial makeup maybe, or do they have other disabilities or disorders, you know, that they have been diagnosed with, you know, stuff like that would have been just a little more interesting to know about. Not really required, but just something that would have put a little more spin on your manual, you know. Same thing, like how many clients are in your clinic, and like a rough estimate, just so you know how many the trainee is going to be working with. You know, is there 500 clients that are in the clinic or whatever setting that y'all have, or is there only 10? That kind of makes a difference with the trainee. So that was nice information.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
I'm almost done with section 1, I promise you guys. Yeah, and then I wrote in here, are there any clients partaking in any other therapies that might make a difference with the intervention y'all have in place? Is there any coordination of care or anything going on with other therapists or other doctors or something like that? But overall, section 1 looked really great, you guys. So I was very impressed by it. This was actually the section that I had wrote for my group, and there was a lot of things that I saw and I was like, oh, I didn't include that on mine. So I was actually very impressed with it. So kudos to you guys. It looked awesome. Do y'all have any questions on that feedback?
I don't think so. That was really great feedback. Thank you. And we'll make the changes that you've suggested. Yeah.
Okay, so I will move on. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'll move on to section 2. So it was noted for section 2 that there was a really great summarization of all the articles. There was a lot of information and it was really useful information. So we did appreciate that as well. It was noted that when you write out an abbreviation, make sure that you just kind of say what it stands for prior to that abbreviation. So I think somewhere it was mentioned an NCR or something, and it had not yet been discussed. So someone might not know what an NCR is. So just to kind of type that out and give someone that information prior to using the abbreviation for it.
Yeah.
we also mentioned it was a great idea adding in the article under the coach and feedback about training the parents. So that was appreciated as well. I don't believe that that's something that we really discussed a lot in our manual. So that was something that we felt it was very informational. There were great examples provided from the BACB task list, and they were very relevant to the topics that y'all were discussing. The research was easy to follow and it was easy to understand. Y'all were very descriptive without actually having to pull up the articles that were discussed. So y'all did a great job summarizing those. Let's see. Again, just a little APA formatting error under the assessment for group training methods. One of the references was not in the correct formatting, but that's a simple fix. And that's something that we all had issues with apparently. So it happens when there's multiple people working on the same project. So as for the assessments, there was the question, how are you going to measure that your staff understands the concepts they've been taught? And are you just focusing the staff assessing the training? So
this one, we were a little confused by this feedback just because the way that we were thinking of it was that the DRA competency is the way to measure if they understand the concepts as well as like the knowledge acquisition test. But I guess we could like go back and actually mention in that section that this is how we're measuring that. So that's a good point.
Yeah. The training timeline that y'all included was very well organized. And then again, the links that you include, just make sure that they're working. But other than that, the section 2 looked really great as well. So do y'all have any questions on this section? No?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't know that we're really providing a whole lot of like critique to it because overall the whole project looked great. So it's just kind of complimenting you guys, but I hope that this feedback is somewhat helpful. I'll go ahead and move on to section 3. So section 3 of the project, this is kind of where it started getting a little more confusing. And as some of our group mates had mentioned, it was a little bit overwhelming. So it's like a lot of direct quotes, which is a good thing, but kind of expand on those direct quotes in more like layman's terms, just to make it a little more understandable and not so formal and professional that it's hard to understand, you know.
Yeah,
I
really appreciated that feedback, by the way, just because personally, in my current position at a school I work at, that's one of the main things I'm pushing for is for things to be accessible to anyone and
yeah,
it's to anybody. And so that I'm glad you guys caught that for us.
yeah. Yeah, and it was just kind of mentioned that, you know, a lot of these trainees aren't even yet in RBT, and they're just coming out of high school or something like that. So some of the information, it's great information, but maybe leave it out until they've had more of their basic fundamentals taught to them and stuff like that, or just make it more in layman's terms that they can understand it. Considering this is not something that they've probably been exposed to yet at this point. You know, something to think about, make it a little more easily understood.
And I think that came from our section too, but I did not mean that to be negative. And I worked in my career before for a brokerage firm, and I did a lot of training manuals, and that was one thing we always tried to do. Like even as a trainer, you know, you may know all the language and you kind of take it for granted, but if you had somebody come from another place and come to work for you, you know, you don't know how they did things, and it could just be overwhelming for them because, you know, you just wanted, and again, I put it in my feedback. That's my opinion. You can take it. You can say, no, I don't agree with you. And I would be 100% okay with that. I just felt that if I started at a company and read it, it was great information. But if I were going to have to go train, you know, 10 people, I just want to read that and it'd be really, you know, like
Yeah.
easy, you know, where I don't have to think about it. I'm like, okay, here's my stuff. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, and I don't mean that again negative. You
Yeah.
guys did a great job with the manual.
I think we appreciate that completely. Like, so we kind of finished the manual and particularly the PSI, and we were just like, wow, it's 200 slides. This is ridiculous. The training manual was, I think, 90 pages, and we just kind of at the end realized we've gone slightly overboard with it all. That was kind of, we all said that, we were just like, oh no.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great feedback. Thank you for that.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah.
We do appreciate that you guys explained why the behavior occurs and provided the function for it. And y'all also provided a great explanation of an FBA and what that entails. So that's some really great information that a training could really take in and learn from. So great job with that, you guys. Another kind of thing to take into consideration, y'all mentioned the DRA, but there wasn't a whole lot of mention of the NCR until the section where you choose between the two. So maybe expand a little bit more on that so that someone can more understand the differences between the two.
So we actually had checked with the teacher on that one because that's what we were thinking we had to do. But she said that just that section of the overview is where we only needed to mention it, which I thought seemed kind of, I was thinking what you were thinking is like give more of detail of both so they understand. But yeah, I was thinking how you were thinking.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, and you know what, Taylor, I think when we submitted our feedback, I looked at our feedback from the professor afterwards, and she actually said the same thing. So I had to take out everything for DRA in ours because she said she wouldn't count against it. Yeah, and I think Sarah and I just crossed up in that when she provided her feedback. But we thought the same thing, and we included a whole thing on DRA, and she told me that I didn't need to, even though when I read the instructions, it was very confusing. So I didn't catch that when we submitted our feedback, but yeah, we got the same feedback, guys.
Okay, cool. So we're running a little on time, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to section 4. There really wasn't a lot of critique on section 4 because section 4 looked really great. Melanie had mentioned that she really loved the way the glossary was set up. She loved that there were examples to most of the terms, and it was really easy to understand, which is what y'all had mentioned about our glossary when y'all provided our feedback, was that it should be more in our own words. And Melanie said that's something that she had wished that she had done. So other than that, section 4 was really clear. It was really concise and easy to understand. And it looked really great. So any questions on section 3 or 4?
No questions.
No. Okay, and lastly, section 5, this was a little more lengthy with the PSI and the PowerPoint and everything. And it was a lot of information to take in, but the knowledge acquisition test, it looked awesome. You included a lot of foundational knowledge as well as some specifics to your own training with a variety of question formats. So that was really appreciated, and it made it a little bit easier to take in. The PRE detailed. So it included a lot of information, and it was a little bit a lot. So it was kind of hard to navigate through just because it was so much information, and then some of the links and stuff didn't work on it, so it just kind of made it confusing, I guess you could say. So just maybe look through that, maybe see if you could break it down a little bit, and not include so much information. You know, that's what I have for that. So
Yeah, that's great feedback. I was the one that kind of set out the outline for the PSI, and I was thinking, wait, no, if we're going to do DRA, they need to know what reinforcement is, they need to know what this is, and kind of had a mini like, oh no, they need to learn so much.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate your feedback, and the links, I'll definitely go through and check them to see if they're working. It's something that's new to all of us, so we didn't quite know how to do it and everything, but no, thank you for that. I appreciate it, and we'll try and take out some of the information in the slides so it's not overwhelming for everybody.
We
Danielle-
opened it with so many slides, and we were like, oh, okay, let's get started. Let's break it down. So
We got a little carried away with it, I think.
I'll take responsibility for the links though. Like I went through and did a lot of those too, and I'm sure that I missed some. So
I had to Google how to do that, so don't
Yeah.
feel bad.
you know, great job to y'all, because I couldn't figure it out. But we'll move on to the PowerPoint presentation. We were really impressed that you guys used audio files in that. It made it a lot more interesting to watch the PowerPoint. But then some of the audio files were just reading what was actually on the PowerPoint slide. So maybe using those audio files to y'all's advantage and discussing something other than what's written on the slide, more so like expanding on what's there with the audio file or something. But that was pretty neat, and that's something that we didn't use, was the audio file. So great job with that. Carly mentioned that the presentation, she thought, should have been a little more narrowed in on the DRA of escape maintained behaviors. She said it wasn't really mentioned until like halfway into the PowerPoint. And it was more so like providing information and definitions and background information instead of just going straight in with, you know, what is a DRA of escape maintained behavior, and then expanding on that. So it's just something to, okay. I promise I'm almost done, you guys. She mentioned too that the PowerPoint maybe could have had like more of a script to it that the trainer could use, and not necessarily have to say word for word everything that was on the PowerPoint, but they could reference to it if they needed to. And then it would make the PowerPoint like a little less wordy, and it would make it a little more easy to understand and view. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect sense. Thank you.
The role play overall looked really great. We appreciated that there were visuals in the scenario cards, and the scenarios were so creative. So they were really fun to look over, and they made it a lot easier to understand what was going on. Carly did say that the steps were not super specific on how the DRA would be, like how the procedure would go for the role play. So maybe expand on that just a little bit, give a little bit more detail about how that should go for the role play, so that, you know, everyone knows what's going on at that point in the training. The modeling, the specific script was awesome. However, there was a little bit of inconsistency with the scenario that you guys used. So she said that in the scenario, y'all said that the alternative behavior would be asking for a break, but yet in the scenario, you had the child ask for help, which in a way you're still asking for, you know, a break or something from an aversive task. But just kind of make that a little more consistent with each other.
Yeah.
Your coaching technique chart was a great idea, and it had a lot of useful tips for the trainees. And then your training acceptability surveys were very well thought out and thorough. So overall, y'all had a great project, and it was really entertaining to look through. And it's something that we would definitely use for our own training. Maybe just shorten it down a little bit. Other than that, y'all have any other questions or anything else that y'all would have liked to see from us?
No, that was all good
No.
feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate it all.
Yeah,
Do you have any-
definitely.
Thank you guys so much. Do you want, let's see, should I stop recording now?
Yeah, that's good.
Cool.